Hey, welcome back to the show. It's the 22nd of April. I want to check in real quick. Haven't talked to you in a little while. Trump is bashing the Fed, taking on Powell in a dramatic way. Unnecessary. As a conservative, I'm on board. I'm on board Trump's agenda. The agenda that President Trump is running, that he ran on, is the agenda conservatives have been running on for 30 or 40 years. He was the only one to actually pursue it consistently, whether he believes in it or not. And now that he's in office as a lame duck president, no need to worry about re-election. He can pursue these goals without much real concern. The border, government spending, deficits and debt, wasteful spending, fraudulent spending, and of course our massive trade imbalance that began in 1974 when Richard Nixon unleashed Henry Kissinger on China and the decimation of America's manufacturing sector and middle class began. 2024, the United States ran a $1.2 trillion trade deficit in goods. Since 1974, on a gross basis, we have probably sent close to $40 trillion overseas. Some of that, of course, same party trade. So American multinational corporations benefited from that, maybe 40% of that, but still that number represents the amount of imports over that period of time. On a net basis, so exports minus imports, we're looking at something like $23-24 trillion of wealth sent overseas. Our trade policy has run since 1974, has benefited the coasts, the connected, the wealthy, and of course has decimated the middle of the country in the middle class. And we have the numbers to prove it. So I'm on board President Trump's efforts at tariffs. Quotas are another option. Depreciation of the dollar is another option. When we think about renegotiating trade policy, we're talking about tariffs. I believe in reciprocity. I believe President Trump's position on reciprocity is correct. You want to put tariffs on us, we put them on you. You want to take tariffs off, we'll take them off too. Reciprocity is the right way to go on trade. It's going to be painful. President Trump ran on this in 2015-16. He ran this in 2023-24. There should be no surprises to anybody that this is happening. The speed in which he's doing it and the executive order method he's using, a little bit surprising. I'm not a huge fan of the executive order. I don't believe it to be constitutional, even though it's been ruled as such. President Trump is now blowing out the records in terms of presidents using executive orders. I ask, where are the Republicans in Congress? Why aren't they on board? A quick segue, why aren't they on board getting some legislation passed to shut down these overzealous federal district court judges that are making judgments way beyond their purview to slow down the Trump administration? The only tool the Democrats have, it doesn't seem to be a legal tool. In any event, yesterday, President Trump ratcheted up the tension with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, calling for preemptive cuts in interest rates. Trump says there's virtually no inflation in the U.S. and that costs for energy and most other things are on the decline. He went on to say, with these costs trending so nicely downward, just what I predicted they would do, there can be almost no inflation, but there can be slowing of the economy unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now. Now in all caps. Of course, the Mr. Too Late major loser is Jerome Powell. This is not the way to go. And while I believe in the Trump agenda, the policy prescriptions, the solutions, the messaging by the Trump administration has been really, really bad. And this is another example of it. We can't have a public fight between the president and the chair of the Federal Reserve. Remember now, the Federal Reserve is an independent institution. It does have a connection to the federal government, of course, insofar as Congress has given it the charter to exist back in 1913. The Congress could withdraw that tomorrow. Of course, there's also a connection in terms of who runs the Fed. The president appoints the board of governors. Those members that he appoints are approved by the Senate. And then from those board of governors, a person is selected to be the chair of the Federal Reserve. And currently that's Jerome Powell, who was put in place by Trump in 2017, got re-upped by President Biden. And now, of course, you can see Donald Trump is calling for his firing. Get rid of him. He's not acting the way the president wants him. We want an independent Fed. We don't want a Fed to cave to political pressure. We certainly don't want Congress, even though many on the libertarian side would argue that the Constitution requires Congress to control the money supply. As a monetarist myself, believe the Fed is the institution best suited for that. Having said that, I have disagreed with Fed policy since 2008. Quantitative easing, zero interest rate policy, the twist, giving themselves a new mandate, apparently, that is to protect stock markets from going down, or stocks generally. The bubble we see in stocks today is a result of the Fed. Anyway, the Fed began raising interest rates in 2022 in the face of 9% annual inflation engendered by the Biden administration and their overzealous spending. Inflation has come back down below 3%, but Trump to suggest there's no inflation is just wrong. It's a lie. The data doesn't support that. Right now, we think in the consumer price index, inflation is running 2.6, 2.7, 8%. PPI, low twos. I believe the Fed has acted too soon in lowering rates over the past year, and I believe the Fed should stay on hold this year and not lower the federal funds rate any further. And yet here we are, President Trump calling for that. Now, I don't hear anyone else with solutions about correcting our trade imbalance. There's not a long list of solutions. Tariffs, quotas, reciprocity, depreciation of the dollar, economic growth. But the quickest, best solution is imposing tariffs on countries that have tariffs on our exports, negotiating reciprocity. But markets are taking a tumble on this. There's lots of panic about this. Obviously, U.S. multinational corporations will be hurt by this. Americans will be hurt by this. But I remind you again of all the problems we have, and we have many, and one of them is the trade imbalance. There are no painless solutions to correcting our trade imbalance, period. Those who benefited over the past 50 years are going to get hurt. And that's Wall Street. Main Street's been crushed. And so it's time for Main Street and take a little pain on Wall Street. So there's concern about the S&P 500, the Dow Industrial moving lower, and yet we're still above levels of 2021, 2022. We're still near all-time highs. And the Fed has clearly already demonstrated they're ready to act as plunge protection if stocks go too far, too fast. And I remind you again that this is not human beings that are driving these markets, whether it be in the dollar, the bond market, the stock market. These are algorithms. This is AI. These large swings, unlike we've seen ever, are a result of these software applications. Let's put the human back in control. Anyway, my point is this. The messaging by Trump is not good. The whole team. We need some humility. We need some backdoor dealing. He doesn't have to publicize anything. And this public war with Powell will go nowhere. Now, Trump is right. Energy prices have come off. We looked at the CPI index from last month. We see the drivers for it turning negative were energy prices. And that's really what Trump is referring to. The CPI was down 0.1% last month, and he's referring to that as no inflation. But overall, the price level is still elevated. The only way to get the price level lower is through a sharp drop in demand or a huge increase in supply. So I'm on board the tariffs, Mr. President, but the waffling on the tariffs on one day, off the next, exceptions, delays, suspensions, not helpful. Pick a policy and stick to it. Now, in order to calm the panic, many are calling for some publicized deal between one or another countries that is driven by reciprocity. And I'm sure the Trump administration is moving as quickly as possible to do that. And we have a lot of countervailing forces right now in the market as a result of these tariff actions. We have interest rates rising. We have the dollar selling off, bonds selling off while stocks sell off. So a lot of correlations have been disrupted here. This could have something to do with China. China is very angry. They could be using their financial power to manipulate our bond market and the currency markets. But depreciating dollar is okay for the U.S. That helps make our exports less expensive and imports more expensive. Another tool that can be used to reverse our trade imbalance. I'd like to see better messaging by the Trump administration. I'd like to see the end of public criticism, public bullying of the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. It's not going to help anybody. I know he loves to do this as his personality. He does it with everyone. But Jerome Powell, like him or not, he's not Mr. Too late. He's Mr. Too early. President Trump's tariff proposals are inflationary. They don't have to be, but they're likely to be. Remember, the idea of imposing tariffs is to make imports more expensive so that the domestic consumer substitutes a domestic good for the imported good. that domestic good now being cheaper. What we have to remember is, in order for that to happen, domestic producers, domestic retailers have to maintain their prices to gain back market share instead of being greedy and take advantage of the higher imported prices to increase their margins. And then the other problem, of course, is many of the goods we're putting tariffs on that come from China, from Asia, from other low wage manufacturing economies. We simply don't have any substitutes. Our elected officials, starting in the 1970s, successive presidents, successive members of Congress, House, Senate, appointed officials in the executive branch, have failed when it comes to trade policy over the past 50 years. And we're now having to pay that price to correct the problem they've created. We, as voters, are responsible for this. And so there's going to be pain, and we have to accept it. Let's lose the bashing of the Fed in public. Mr. President, are you listening? All right, that's all I have for you right now. Always try to buy American.